Okay, so sorry for I'm sorry we are a little bit technically handicapped out here, but okay, we'll hopefully we will go through the entire event without any technical problem. So before we start, I would like to introduce MSI and our campaign, and then introduce our beautiful speakers we have uh, today. So welcome everyone. So I'm Parth Usha. I'm the Vice President for External Affairs in MSCI. MSCI is Medical Student Association of India. We are India's first and largest student-run medical student organization. We were started in 2012, and we are more than 25,000 medical students present all over India in all of our 28 states and union territories. So we generally function in standing committees. We have standing committee on public health, medical education, human rights and peace, and sexual and reproductive health and rights, including HIV and AIDS, and also two exchange-based standing committee, which is standing committee on professional exchange and research exchange. Along with that, we have two units. One is WHO AMR unit, which is in collaboration with the WHO AMR Office of India, and another is the bioethics unit. So without much ado, I would like to invite you to our campaign, which is the External Affairs Week, and one of the part of the campaign is the OSD today, where Darin and Anna will take you through the process of how we can use policy which are paper to practice how we can implement our policies in high level meetings and also in different spectrum of medical education, research, and advocacy. So let me start by introducing our beautiful speakers that we have with us. Our first speaker we have is Anna. Anna is a sixth-year medical student from Greece, and she is serving as the liaison officer for medical sciences and research issues. She leads global advocacy and policy work on responsible research and innovation, access to medicine, open science, research education, global surgery, and youth engagement in One Health. Anna has also represented IFMSA at major international platforms, including the World Local Production Forum and the UNODC Young Doctors Meeting and the UN Open Science Conference, contributing to youth-led dialogue and advocacy in global health governance. She has been actively involved in educational policymaking, curriculum evaluation, and global research exchanges, aiming to empower medical students to become agents of change and foster collaboration between science, education, and advocacy for a more equitable and sustainable future. Welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for being with us today. And then we have with us Darin. Darin is the liaison officer for sexual and reproductive health and rights issues, including HIV and AIDS, and is a final year medical student from Algeria. She is deeply committed to SRHR advocacy and global health equity, believing that youth voices are essential in building fair and inclusive health systems. Her work focuses on advancing comprehensive sexuality education, promoting bodily autonomy, and standing against gender-based violence and all forms of inequity that prevents the realization of right to health for all. Previously, Darin has served as the IFMSA SCORA Regional Assistant for EMR. Then she served as the SCORA External Affairs Assistant. And also she is serving as the NMO President for Algeria, before which she served as the Secretary General, NORA, and also the NORA Assist, and also the local officer. So we have two very, very experienced people in the field to come and talk to us about, how we can use the policy papers that are being made every year and how can we implement them in different high-level meetings and in our advocacy work and all the groundwork that we're doing. Thank you, Anna and Darin, for being with us today, and the floor is yours. Anna, I think you can go first and then followed by Darin.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Partha, for inviting us and for having us here. I think it's very important to have these discussions and have these spaces to see what we're doing in IFMSA, but also what can be done in national and local level, because this is where the real impact comes. So thank you so much for having us and looking forward to the discussion.
Hi, thank you so much, Barto, for inviting me and Anna to this amazing panel. And thank you, everyone, for showing interest in it. We have 71 participants, including me and Anna and Barto. This is a huge number. Thank you for putting your trust into this amazing campaign. And just before we begin, I would just like to say Happy Diwali to those of you who celebrated not so long ago. And without further ado, I am going to give back the floor to Barto.
Uh, Happy Diwali to you, to Darin and Anna. It's one of the biggest festivals that we celebrate in India. So yeah. So we'll start off with a basic introduction. First, we'll like to hear from Anna. Anna, like, what exactly do you mean, by policy, and how can we effectively integrate our national and international policies in medical research conferences and academic forums to ensure that advocacy and evidence-based action go hand in hand within the field of medical sciences and research?
Thank you so much for the question. So I would say, in general, a policy is a set of actions that we need to take on a specific topic or a specific stance and achieve some specific goals. But within the IFMSA context, or in general, the global health context, and how we use it as non-state actors, is basically it's our official stance on a specific agenda, on a topic that affects our education, affects our everyday work in the medical field, and it is backed by evidence. So it's not only our stance, but also the things we feel like should change in the specific field. There is a call to action and the evidence to back up all these informations and all these things that we mentioned that we believe in. But how, like, to bridge it with research, I think it's very important, because basically policy and research are two sides of the same thing, and they bridge the gap between evidence and action. So research gives us all the data we need to take these evidence-based actions and say to people, okay, this needs to be changed because there is this data backing us up. So it's basically two steps of the same circle. And if you look into the policy circle, there is the planning, where you actually collect your data and try to say, okay, what is exactly the need? And of course, it should be also the other way around. Policies should be on the research framework. It should be part of how we do our research. What are the needs right now? What do we need data on in our community at this moment? And as medical students, we should also consider this aspect when choosing topics for our thesis or for any research that we're involved into. Try to see, okay, what is there that we should take more action. And of course, since we're also in an academic field, it's very important to put these informations there, to put the policy documents and on discussions on an academic setting, and promote this evidence-based approach, because it's not always the path that's being followed, unfortunately. And something last that I would like to mention is that with policy documents, and in general with policy and advocacy, there is a lot of interprofessional work, which is very essential, and we should use the policy documents to start new collaborations with other youth organizations, but also academia, our governments, our universities, and try to bring this change that we're advocating for. And this is very essential for the policies, because having a policy on something, it means that you can't bring the change in your own. If it's just a matter that it's only up to you to change, you could just change it within, I don't know, 1 day or 1 month or a few years. So you wouldn't need to have a policy and all these calls to action. Policy means that we need other people, we need to work together, and this is very important and very inspiring to have and achieve.
Thank you so much, Anna. Yes, it's very important. Like when we talk about policy, we generally think about advocacy, but we do tend to forget the academia part. Thank you so much for highlighting that. Now, moving on to Dareen. In our advocacy for SRHR and HIV and AIDS, how can we strategically use these policies, to strengthen our messaging and make sure our voices are heard by key stakeholders and decision makers?
Thank you so much, Barto, for the question, and thank you, Anna, for providing context into what is a policy document. So in all my answers to the questions, I'm going to be very direct to you. It's not going to be very polished language that is used in diplomatic spaces, because I really would like to explain to you the basic concepts and the realities of the situation. So the first message I would like to deliver to you is that it is not mandatory for us as youth advocates to demand new commitments. Rather, no, we have already commitments. We have commitments that exist already, that our leaders had already agreed to, and sometimes our role is just to hold them accountable for the promises they already made. So I'm going to give you an example. Now we have the emerging topic that we're going to talk about this term in SRHR in the global arena is HIV and AIDS advocacy. Why is it important? Because the HIV, the global AIDS strategy is expiring in 2026, and now they're making the strategy 2631. So you have a few examples of policy commitments that member states, or in this situation, your governments have already agreed or have already committed to. And these are, first of all, the 2030 agenda, and you have two important sustainable development goals that you can always tackle in your activities on HIV and AIDS. And that's SDG 3 and SDG 5. So this, relying on the 2030 agenda when you write your activities or when you write the proposals for all of your activities, this gives you the legitimacy to demand commitment or demand universal access, or in your situation, national access to all SRHR services, and to remind your government to their commitment to end HIV and AIDS, to end AIDS, sorry. And then you have the global AIDS strategy. So when you rely your activity on your commitment to this strategy, it's going to explain that it is a whole community-led response, and it is a perspective to include all youth. There's also different types of regional frameworks. I'm not very familiar with the Asia Pacific frameworks, but for EMR, there's an SRHR EMRO framework that's in relation with the WHO initiatives. So you need to rely on these to remind your governments that they made promises they have to commit to. Now, as per the second part of the question on how we strategically use policies to strengthen the messaging of our campaigns and make our voices and make sure voices are heard by key stakeholders and decision makers. First of all, when you rely on these frameworks, you make it almost impossible for your messages to be ignored by the stakeholders. But as small steps to strategically use policy for your messaging, first of all, you want to decode the policy. You're going to read it, you're going to identify which parts of these policy align with your advocacy goal for the campaign or for the initiative you're going to hold in your animal or locally. And then you're going to translate them into very simple and powerful messages. I have an example for one of our campaigns that we did on HIV and AIDS last year. So my country, Algeria, committed under SDG 3.3 to end AIDS by 2030. However, in my country, young people still lack access to PrEP or comprehensive sexuality education in general. So this is going to be the key message of our campaign. reminding the commitment of the government, and then why we believe that this campaign should happen because there is an issue. And then you're going to frame your message for bigger impact. So you're going to link the policy to the lived experience of youth. You can use storytelling, you can talk about, you have to include intersections of so many identity pillars: gender, youth, stigma, religion, access to barriers, and you're going to make sure you include all of the stakeholders. The stakeholders in this case can also be the opposition that you have in your country. And here we talk about religious people, we talk about a lot of people in the society, a lot of groups in the society that still stigmatize HIV and AIDS. And then the last step is to engage in policy spaces. And that could be the groups that the government organizes to review the national policies. You create alliances within your NMO. I'm sure MSI India has is part of a lot of alliances. And you have to be strategic about the timing that you take each of these actions. For example, you don't just so randomly want to celebrate HIV and AIDS Day. No, there is the World AIDS Day, and that's on the 1st of December. So in the first week of December, you can create a campaign and organize it all through the week to tackle a lot of pillars. Okay, and it's very important in our age to use social media and use it very smart, depending on the target audience that you have. So it could be the youth. If you want to target Gen Z, you're going to have to use fun videos, because our generation has this thing that we call brain rot. So you have to make a silly video to teach them something. And in serious videos or in serious posts in your formal platforms, you have to remind the stakeholders that are going to see this, which are usually the NGOs and the government entities and whatnot. You remind them about the youth legitimacy. If you're representing IFMSA, you remind them that as IFMSA, you're here representing 1.5 medical students worldwide, and you bring medical tips and medical perspective plus evidence to the table. And here you can rely on IFMSA policy document that you're going to find them on the website. And one final point I would like to talk about is to partner smartly. For example, if you want to have a campaign about UNAIDS, you have the global network of people living with HIV and AIDS, and you have UNAIDS. These are very relevant agencies that are so interested in working nationally with NMOs. And so you have to use, and they are very relevant stakeholders for the next strategy, 2631, the global AIDS strategy. So if you want to make an activity about this topic, you know who to partner with. Sorry, Parto, if I took so much time.
No, that's completely okay. You can go on, Darren. Okay, thank you so much, Darren, for bringing that perspective and about taking example about HIV and AIDS and how important for us to tackle. You also mentioned how taking us as a stakeholder, it is very important. They get the medical stakeholder, but also they get the youth stakeholder, like the youth perspective to everything they're taking, which is very important and very relevant. So yeah, thank you for bringing that about. Now we'll go on to a few more questions before we start taking questions from our audiences who are present here. So this question is for Anna. So how do you think, every year we have policies that are adopted twice in the General Assembly, once in the March meeting, once in the August meeting. So how do you think the IFMSA policy translate into real world impact? And if you have been part of so many high level meetings, so could you share examples where policy influence discussion at a global platform?
Thank you so much for this question. I guess it's something that we have been discussing very intensively in the past year and a little bit more. Basically, for the people that don't know, we vote on the policy documents on our General Assemblies because it is a document representing the whole federation So both in March meeting and August meeting that are the General Assemblies of IFMSA, we have policy documents proposed. Right now, there are around 80 policy documents that are active, which is quite a big number. But still, the policy documents are being used, although it is a big number, they're still being used for our advocacy, for the events that we're going to attend, for the statements, for the partnerships we're going to have, the campaigns. They basically are regulating our external work. But something that we forget is that they also regulate the internal work. The policies are something that we take into consideration when choosing capacity building sessions, topic sessions, things that we provide our members with, because it's very important to share this information. When I started in the introduction, I don't know if you remember, it said like most of the change is happening on national and local level. So yes, we're doing the advocacy on international level. Yes, we discuss these topics on the World Health Assembly or other high-level meetings, but what is very important is to transfer all this information and translate the policy documents into knowledge for the people to discuss in their local communities, to discuss with their governments, to discuss with their universities, to apply to their education. So I think this is also another very important way. And this is also like the reason that in the recent years, we try to have also specific framework and have the outcomes of the policy usage gathered together. We structured the policy usage report to reflect to this, to include all the sessions, to include also all the internal work and also all the ways that we're using them apart from the major events and the statements, and try to encourage this aspect, try to combine the policy documents and minimize their number to be used more. And I think that a very good example and something that is also like I have seen MSI advocating a lot is for environmental health, and climate. So, for example, the policies that we have on this area, we're using them a lot, of course, for COP, which is the main event for climate, but we have the pre-COP, which is a workshop for medical students to be educated on these areas. And I think this is something very, very real and something that happened recently and really showed the importance of also using the policy documents on internal level with medical students. And it was actually very impactful. There were a lot of events after this and a lot of, I think it inspired a lot of people to actually take actions in these areas. So it was great to see it last year.
Thank you so much, Anna, for giving us examples about how those work has been seen. Even I could add on to that little bit, like when we went the World Health Assembly, the youth were given the position to, after the pandemic accord was passed, the youth was given the position to make statements from every region, and all these statements are made on basis of all our policies. So yeah, maybe maybe we can start small in our local and national level, and then think about the impacts that are seen in international level. Thank you for highlighting that, Anna. Now, moving on to the next question for Dareen. From your IFMSA experience, how can medical students use these existing policies to support their local and national advocacy initiatives? Like Anna has already mentioned, we have 80 policy documents that are active as of now. So how could we use this, to support our local and national advocacy initiatives?
Thank you, Parto, for the very relevant question. So indeed, we have an IFMSA a huge amount of policy documents. So first thing that you need to do to plan your campaign is assess the type of information you're going to rely on. In this case, you're relying on one of IFMSA policy document, and that's, let's say we're going to have a campaign about, again, bias, or call it whatever you want. We're going to have a campaign about HIV and AIDS advocacy, no matter what the subtopic is. So we're going to rely on one or maybe two policy documents. One of them is comprehensive sexuality education, and the main one is sexually transmitted infections, which is going to be renewed this GA. So this March meeting. So this is going to narrow down the list of the policy documents you're relying on from 80 to just 2. So this is already amazing. So in the policy document, you're going to find a certain structure. One of the structures, one of the pillars of the structure is the calls to action. You're going to check the calls to action and see what do you have to do, what IFMSA believes that you as an animal or as a member in one of the animals should do as actions. So this is first. Second, you see what IFMSA expects from policymakers or from authorities to take as actions, and that is something you can rely on. So this is first. You found the policy, you found the calls to action, and in the rest of the policy document, you're going to find data. So everything is evidence-based. And you can fully rely on that policy document. So the other thing that you should remember when you read the policy document is that this is a structured document. So you're going to let it provide structure to your own campaign, plus with the evidence-based information that you have there, it's going to provide legitimacy to your concept note of the activity. So this is going to help your work move from passion for HIV and AIDS advocacy to actual evidence-based influence. So this is the first point that you should take into consideration whenever you're drafting your concept note. Second of all, you're going to identify what are the commitments that your country has already taken. For example, did your country sign, did your country vote in favor of the global AIDS strategy? Or are there any national health plans when it comes to AIDS eradication? Or is your country committed to the 2030 SDGs agenda? And then you're going to include the SDGs, the relevant SDGs for your activity in your plan. So that's going to be SDG 3 and 5. So, and then after you do this, you finalize your concept note, and then you're going to quote these policies when you make the concept note and when you meet with your deans. I'm mentioning deans here, faculty deans, because in my animal, we work through our LCs. So all of our activities are mainly local. However, the process of creating the concept notes is absolutely universal. So think globally, act locally. This is the motto for IFMSA programs. So when you quote the policies you relied on, first of all, the policy document of the International Federation of Medical Students Association, which is the biggest student-led organization in the world. This is going to give you first the legitimacy of being a medical student representative in your city if you have other medical students associations fighting you for the financing spot or whatever support you're going to get from your university. So mentioning this already gives you legitimacy that you're a most legitimate representative for medical students. Why? Because IFMSA has evidence-based advocacy efforts when it comes to HIV and AIDS and other topics that you want to talk about in your campaign. And then when you mention the government's commitments to SDG 30 and the global AIDS strategy, this is going to make your campaign almost impossible to ignore, or your demands almost impossible to ignore. And then you're also going to rely on the international commitments that the other NGOs have to strengthen your awareness or advocacy efforts. So I believe this is what makes our requests for endorsement, for our request to be included in some decision-making spaces in my animal almost impossible to ignore. So this is what I would like to mention when it comes to the local national advocacy relying on IFMSA policy documents. And also, maybe a way to thank IFMSA is that if you think that there's something that you would like to enhance in this policy document, or there's a group that you see is underrepresented in IFMSA policy document, there's always a call for input that is open before the adoption of policy documents in March meeting. So you can always fill that and be honest about what do you think the policy document is missing, and then we enhance the policy documents so they're representative of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren, for not briefly, very elaborately explaining about how activity initiatives can, incorporate the policies, the existing policies that is there. Thank you so much for bringing that out, and also about, having the input so that there's the diversity that IFMSA policies represent, because we know when we make policies, we always look upon research, and most of the research are done from the global north. Most of the data is taken from the global north, and we try to forget global south, even when we're making the policies. So it is very important for us to, include all regions. And also when it comes to India, there is a lot. It's a huge country. So whenever we make our policies, we also try to look into taking data from all regions in India. Thank you for highlighting that, Darin. And now we'll move on to our next question. It is for Anna. Anna, policies are often, seen as very static documents because we don't know how to properly use it. So how can, youth advocate ensure policies remain dynamic? Sorry, I think this is okay. Sorry, I think this was responsive to emerging SIH or any health issues or academia.
Thank you so much. So I think that we should try to treat policy documents as a framework, as something that is changing shapes, as something that we are actually actively using with the methods that I mentioned earlier. Because if we're going to have a policy document just to publish it and say, okay, this is our public opinion, and then for the next years, just have it as a public opinion, it will be static, unfortunately. But we have to kind of interact with the policy document. We have to use it and use it again and share it with the external partners and do statements and to receive feedback on the statements that we're doing. And one of the mechanisms that IFMSA has to make sure that it is actually changing, it's of course that in any General Assembly we can propose amendments. We can change the policy document if there's something that has changed, but also the fact that it has a limit of 3 years, that it really has to be renewed after those 3 years. And theoretically, the situation, apart from very specific situations, but in most cases, the situation hasn't changed within 1 or 2 years on a specific topic. So the 3 years is a good, let's say, barrier or a good time frame. I know that some NMOs also have for 2 years the policy documents, still for the same aspect, to make sure that if there's any major research happening or in any major events, they are included in the updated version of the policy document, and that they are themselves mandated to update it and make sure that is a framework and it's not just something that stays there. Of course, we work and we believe in the same topics. It doesn't change. It doesn't mean that 10 years ago we didn't work on SRHR, for example, right? But we need to update the policy document because although we believe in the same thing, although we still think that this is important, our stance hasn't changed, but maybe the backing up information has changed. Maybe there's more information. Maybe there are more ideas on what we can do. Maybe there are different calls to action that we can implement. And I think this is something very very nice. I mean, it is some work to have to update them, but it is ensuring exactly this. And I think it's working very well. So I also recommend if anyone likes thinks of having a certain policy document to make sure that you keep it up to date.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. Like, yes, like even in MSI India, we renew our policies every 3 years. Uh, like our policies expire every 3 years, so it is up for renewal if we find them necessary to renew them. So yeah, also to keep our policies updated to everything that's happening, and every day there are new rules and new policies that's coming up, from the government. So we need to keep ourselves updated so that we are in track with everything that's happening nationally. Okay, so next question is for Dareen. Dareen, like uh, we as youth now we have started seeing, like we are getting a table in high level meetings. Uh, Not how much we expect, but at least we are being there and our voices are being heard. So how do you see, meaningful youth engagement are reflected in global policy making spaces, and what can you do to claim their spaces more effectively? And we just don't become a case of tokenism just for youth representative. So how can we meaningfully, engage in this policy making spaces?
Okay, thank you, Barto. Again, I'm going to be very direct and very bold about it. I don't think this is only a blame to put on governments or people inviting us, but it's also on youth. Okay. I'm going to first tell you that from my perspective, this is very direct, I know, but our participation in such spaces feels very performative most of the times, either by the way we're being included or by the way we show up to these spaces. A lot of times, a lot of youth, I'm not speaking about IFMC delegations because we actually have pre-delegation trainings that actually train our delegations to be the perfect representation a youth could have, but some other delegations or some other youth delegates just show up there for the sake of showing up, not because they have ideas, not because they have input, not because they are there to influence, but no, they just wanted to be youth delegates, they just wanted to be representatives of youth there, and khalas, when they reached there, the mission ended. Although for me, that's where it begins. So it does feel very performative because now I'm going to talk about the tokenistic side. We're very often invited into rooms to be there as people in the room, but not as important part of the conversation, as important. I don't know how to say this in English. Interlocutor, as an important person that's there to deliver actual opinions and actual calls to action. So when it comes to actual decision making, we're not present. But when it comes to certain NGOs or certain governments to say that, oh, khalas, we included youth in our delegation, or we included youth with us, but were the youth actually included, or were they just there for the sake of proving a point for a certain government or proving a point for a certain NGO? So most of the times it's photo op hashtags instead of actually including youth and power sharing with youth. So from what I have seen, why did I tell you that I'm not talking about IFMSA delegations? Because things get real for us as IFMSA delegates to so many spaces, as IFMSA delegations to so many high-level meetings, is that it gets real for us because we go prepared. We go having certain key messages that we want to deliver, key messages that rely on evidence-based policies, which are our policy documents, and we know what we want as outcome from that meeting. And here, I think Anna mentioned capacity building 2 questions ago, and I wanted to actually make this message in bold because you need to keep reading, you need to train yourself, you need to humble yourself enough to know, to learn how to actually advocate. Because it's not about being loud or filling up spaces with so many statements and so many things to say. No, it's by actually being strategic. You have to know how the system works, who makes decision, who is deciding when and how things are happening. So you have to get in early to these spaces. So this is something I wanted to talk about. And my advice to youth, to fellow youth, please don't just keep asking questions when you're given the space to speak on, oh, hi, my name is XYZ, and I'm representing XYZ association or XYZ NGO, and I just want to ask you how we can include youth. No, tell them how you can be included in spaces. Tell them how you want the youth to be included, and then it's up to them to implement it. But repeating this question every single time is not getting us anywhere. This is why I said it's not just on the governments, it's not just on the policymakers, but it's also part of, we share the blame for this too, because we're not very strategic about our advocacy efforts. So going back to the point of capacity building, when the youth are speaking the same language and they know the policies and they're backing up the passion they have for certain topics with facts, people will actually start to listen to you. People will actually start considering youth as people that are here to decision, not to make decisions, people that are here to, because they know their importance and they know how they want to shape the future that they're going to lead very soon in 10 or 20 years. This is when people start taking us seriously. My advice to me and to the rest of you is to keep showing up, and every time being a better delegate, every time being a better representative of whatever passion you have, whatever topic you're passionate about. So we have to hold spaces accountable and hold ourselves accountable. So if they say that they're including youth, then we should be asking them rather, that's amazing, but when and where will our input actually be showed, or when will the results show up? Because it's not just about taking a picture, it's also about writing the caption for that picture and writing the background of that picture and the settings of when the picture that's shared on social media were about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren, for not only talking about the truth, like what exactly is happening, but also like motivating us to like be there, take up all the spaces that is given to us. And also, yes, it's very important that we as youth, we cannot just show up. We need to be prepared. Like I remember for IFMSA for World Health Assembly, they have a pre-World Health Assembly, which is a very rigorous, capacity building pathway that happens. It happens over like 4 weekends over a month, and then in Geneva for 7 days. And then we go for, okay, now we are ready enough to represent the youth in WHA. So yeah, it is very important for us to, be prepared to represent the youth in these forums. Thank you for highlighting that beautifully, Darin. Now, just last few questions. So, as liaison officers, what challenges do you face when bridging, policy discussion between global organizations and medical students, and how can we exactly overcome them? I think Anna, you could take this up, and then maybe Darin could follow it up.
Thank you so much for the question. I think I will mention one thing since like it's to both of us to avoid overlapping. But something very important to me is how do we bring the knowledge and everything that we include in our policy documents to the students' level. And I don't mean that there's like a lower level of people that are outside of FMSA, but I mean, how are we making it in a way that people actually understand that it's important? Because if someone didn't bring me into these spaces and they didn't explain me, okay, why this is important, I would just continue my studies. I would just, not care about anything else but, I don't know, anatomy or how to make stitches. So how are we bringing all this information to the people that are there, that are on the ground? And how do we show them that this is important? Because when someone introduces these topics to you, it really makes sense. You actually understand. Yeah, like it's not, it's so difficult. You understand that these are something that we need to work on. That this is problems that we see in our universities. For example, right now I'm working on AMR, and it is a huge issue in Greece, actually. And I knew that it's a huge issue in Greece, so I can connect the clinical perspective with the policy perspective. This is very important, and this is how we can bring change. We tell a story, we show what is actually happening, and by doing this, by connecting this information, we translate it for more people to be there and work on these areas. Back to you, Endarin.
I think I'm just going to take a Parto. I know you're tired of asking questions. So, from my side, I'm going to speak as the liaison officer for Section Reproductive Health and Rights. So, the issue I personally face, well, me and IFMSA when it comes to SRHR externity, is that we have two issues. The first one is that there's a rise of anti-rights movements internationally, even among our externals. And second of all, is that I wouldn't say it's an issue, but we try to be representative of everyone's opinion, and that's almost impossible with the socio-cultural differences of the members in our very animals. And so this is why you see that, for example, for so many topics that are considered conflicting or yes, conflicting or topics that we cannot really find common ground for, we don't have policy documents. And this is because policy documents are supposed to represent IFMSA stance, and that means representing more than 133 animals. And that's almost impossible. And so it's the hardship that I face is, at least in my 26 days in office, is that I'm currently working on a policy brief, and it's almost impossible to satisfy everyone in that policy brief. So in this situation, you rely on the policy document, and this way you are fully backed up by evidence. So it is actually the answer is in the question. Bridging policy discussions between global organizations and our medical students is very challenging. And how do we overcome them? By being evidence-based in our advocacy efforts and by being strategic. And maybe most of the times by setting aside our personal agendas. And yeah, I think this is everything. No, I would actually also talk about members' engagement. It's both continuing to include we're engaging with our external partners, but at the same time try to engage our members from the international team with the external partners or with the external initiatives, and maybe aligning the external efforts that IFMSA is conducting with the internal activities that we're conducting through our programs. So, yeah, Anna, did you talk about the fact that we're medical students too, or do I have to go through that? Yeah, another issue that we face maybe is the fact that people that we work with are medical students, and so having enough people interested in advocacy for all health topics with externals, which is not considered the traditional way of being a medical student, I think this is very challenging, and this needs a lot of capacity building and needs a lot of raising awareness on why it is important for medical students to be also present outside of hospitals, outside of rotations. And I'm going to stop talking so that Porto doesn't kill me. Thank you.
You can continue, Darren. That's that's completely fine. Yes, thank you for mentioning that, like we as medical students, we need to be present outside of hospitals because all health policies that are being made, like if I take India as an example, are made by people who never went to medical school. So that's where the change need to come. We need to maybe start at level like, MSI, and then build up our, capacity so that we can go and be the ones who are making policies when it comes to, health policies for the government and for the country and everything. So maybe this is where we start. Thank you for mentioning that. And, yes. And also you did mention like a lot of our externals are facing a lot of problem because of budget cutting. And when there's budget cutting, it's the youth who is affected first because they take youth as like, let's use the word token again. They take the youth as a token, but they're like, okay, now we don't have enough money, so let the youth go. We'll figure that out later. So when there is this issues that come up, it's always, the youth who are affected. Like, obviously, it's the populations who are affected the most, but when it comes to the work, it's the youth who are let go the first. Thank you for mentioning that. And now, the last question before we move on to our participants is, what advice would you give to young advocates who want to move from policy writing documents to actually using them into negotiation, consultation, and decision-making forums? Maybe we'll start with Dareen, and then Anna can take it over.
Wouldn't say maybe I wouldn't tell the youth to stop making policy documents and actually use them. No, I think this happens in parallel. Use the current policy documents that you have. As I said earlier, I'm going to repeat one of my answers of earlier. When you use the policy documents, you're relying on evidence on evidence that's been proven through research. So this gives you legitimacy on the reasoning behind your campaign and behind your stances and negotiations and consultations. And this is already enough. So besides providing a structure for the statement you want to share, for the arguments you have and whatnot, I think it's a continuous cycle of writing a policy, using it in consultation. You get a rejection or you get a comment about the strategy you have. You try to implement that in the new policy you're going to renew, and so continues the cycle. And I would just say that in negotiations, don't fully rely on policy documents, but remember that there's a very important component to the discussion, and that's your uniqueness as the individual that's passionate about XYZ topic you're advocating for, and you should always bring that to the table. You don't always have to use the same technical words that every other advocate uses. You don't always have to be, I'm going to say, a millennial. Let's say you're born in 2007 and you have a certain language. Sometimes you just have to let that side of your personality show up, because this is how they know they're dealing with a new generation, with new priorities, with new personalities. And we have to include this new generation. And I think this is one way of familiarizing people with what to expect from the future 10 years of youth advocacy. So be yourself. Don't shy away from using terminology that's not used all the time in these settings. And remember that you're not there to represent a policy document or to represent the stance of everyone in the world, but there's also the importance of representing yourself and people you initially started advocating for this topic for. So remember that you're doing this for the people and you being part of the people. This is done by the people for the people. So make sure that your stances, your arguments, and everything you say is selfless. Let's say it's not selfish and it doesn't serve personal agendas. It's there to actually help people, and maybe remind yourself that you're a medical student. So if you feel that there are some policies that go against the teachings of med school, of respecting the dignity of the human body, then you don't have to represent, you don't have to stand by that opinion. And if you feel uncomfortable with one of the stances of one of the policy documents, it's fine. You don't have to be the one to talk about that policy document. Respect your own boundaries, you respect your own composition of identity. If there is a part of your identity that tells you that you're not comfortable delivering such an opinion, don't do it. It gets hectic, it gets too much when so many times when you're there trying to represent everyone's opinion, especially in a sexual reproductive health and rights setting. So if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. And that's it. And yeah, with this, I'm going to give the floor to
Thank you so much. I think Doreen mentioned multiple very, very important topics. So what I could add to that, very small, but still okay, it is to make sure that you own the knowledge, that you own. Right now, it's Open Access Week, by the way, and the question is who owns our knowledge? So I would say own the knowledge that exists, own the policy documents, own what we have built to support our advocacy efforts. Make sure not only that you know the content, but also the context. What is the surrounding in this area? What is the current situation? How is this related to the SDGs or WHO or the UN? What is happening right now? And make sure that you speak from position of credibility, that you know the data, you know actually the what is happening. But also something very important is to build relationships. I don't know if it's good or bad, but a lot of the time the influence comes from relationships that we build, and this is also why we have, I don't know, MOUs and alliances, and even why we have IFMSA, right? It's a federation, it's a network, but also try to get engaged in other networks too, with government representatives, with technical experts, with people that might not be exactly in the field that we're working on, but they have a different perspective, and that is very, very important. And most of the time they have, the influence, so it's good for them to be working, for us to be working with them. And something last that I want to say is that it's not always that we're going to be reading a document, that we're going to be reading a statement. Sometimes it's a discussion. So we need to connect what we want with the other people. We need to connect with people's lives. We need to make it translated in a way that the other person, although they're not a medical student or they're not from our background, they understand why this is important to us and why this needs to be changed. And this is how they're actually going to help us, and how we're going to make the things that matter to us matter to everyone else. And thank you so much for the question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Darlene and Anna, for answering this beautiful and motivating people. And also, mentioning the fact to keep their sanity while advocating, because it's a difficult job when you are just there advocating for something and you see there's nobody who's listening to the youth. So you tend to give up and you feel like, oh, I'm getting so much backlashes. I think I'm doing something wrong, but it's never that way. It's a long process. It takes a lot of work that needs to be done to, keep up advocating, writing policies, and implementing them as and when we move forward. Thank you for highlighting those points. And I think with that, we come to the end of the questions. Now we'll take questions from our participants. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or you can put it in the chat box. And also, we'll share the post-event questionnaire. Please fill the questionnaire. It's important for the certification criteria. And please ask away with your questions. This is the time where you have time with Darin and Anna to ask them anything you want. Yes, Bhavini, go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
So I have one question, that what's the one underrated or like few underrated skills which a policy writer and an advocacy student should develop early on, so that it would be easy for him or her in the future or to advocate about any of the topic or stuff?
Do you want me to know? Okay. Thank you so much, Pavini, for the question. Very interesting, by the way. So, if you're asking about an IFMSA small working group on policy documents, don't shy away from applying it. Just apply, show your passion in the policy, or interest in applying for the policy document, and if you get accepted, there's automatically an IFMSA policy course that's going to teach you everything that you need to learn as a policymaker. But from my personal perspective, I believe that curiosity is what helps the person the most. Developing a good policy document is curiosity, love of reading, and for them not to have too much ego, to know that there are other so different perspectives on the certain topic that the policy document is about. So being humble to learn and being curious enough to also devour and consume knowledge is what helps the person be a good part of the policy document. Maybe I would like to add that being open for feedback, because you're going to receive a lot of feedback throughout your journey in policymaking or as a youth advocate. So that too. And maybe one technical skill is referencing Zotero. So just try to learn on YouTube. I absolutely hated my life when I started learning it, but now it's a cool activity. This is what we use for references. It's what is this? I forgot the English word, but we use this for references. Software. Yes, that's the word. Anna, if you would like to add something.
I think on top of everything, just be curious and just try to get engaged. Like, you don't have anything to lose. Like, so if you're interested or if you want to learn about policy, just try to find something in policy that connects with what you know right now, or like who you are right now, and try to get engaged. It's only gonna bring you closer to the work and make you understand more. So try to have this curiosity. For example, ask questions right now, and get yourself out there.
Thank you so much.
We have one question in the chat box. It's from Smith. He's saying, thank you so much for all the answers. We did learn a lot. I have some audio issues, but I'll drop my question here. How can we make health policies more people-friendly and less bureaucratic?
I can take this one. So I think first of all, it depends on what you want, right? So how are you going to use this policy? Most of the times, we tend to write it in kind of more like official language because it's a public document, but then you need to translate it with other methods. Because in most cases, anyways, whether or not it was written like that, it's not that a random person are gonna open the web page and try to find the policy documents. It's probably gonna be maybe an external partner that wants to see what we're working on. So what you need to do to make the policy people friendly is actually different actions than the policy itself. It's doing a campaign, it's doing raising awareness, I don't know, doing webinars, even street actions, go on the street, like have leaflets or um, some other materials that you're sharing, depends on what you're advocating for. So I think that is what is really needed, and it is what takes more time and more resources. That's why we tend to skip it, and this is why it turns to being bureaucratic.
Okay, I hope the question was answered, Smith. We have one more question. It is from Prathamesh. He says, "Good evening. Thank you for the session. After working for a policy and advocating, how to assess that it's reaching ground level and it's implemented?"
Okay. Thank you very much, Prathamesh, for the question. After working for a policy and advocating, I believe by that I can answer about policy documents and IFMSA. After working on a policy document, how do we assess that it's reaching ground level? So it's being implemented either by us externally or in national or local advocacy. This is very interesting as a question, and it has a lot of components to the answer. First of all, how do we make sure that it's reaching our externals first? So when we're done drafting a policy document, and before submitting it to the NMOs, to the national member organizations, we share it with our externals for input. So this is how they know that we have a certain policy that we're developing in XYZ topic. They give us their input, and this is how they know we have a policy document. They gave us an input to it, so they're familiar with the content and with the calls to action. And then when we write for example, we have written statements for certain delegations and we have policy briefs. In the references, we write the policy documents that we relied on from IFMSA. So every time they check on them, so they know our stance on this topic. They know what are the calls to actions that we wrote for the governors, for the academia, for NGOs, for NMOs and whatnot. And this way, they're going to be curious enough to check the policy document to see that it's actually backed by information. So this gives us more legitimacy. So this is with externals. This is how it reaches the external level. When it comes to internal level, in IFMSA, we have IFMSA programs. So each policy document falls under one or multiple IFMSA programs. So comprehensive sexuality education falls under the IFMSA program on realizing sexual and reproductive health and rights. So in this program, we have NMOs that, first of all, we have a program coordinator that coordinates between the activity coordinators nationally or locally and the IFMSA program to make the program annual impact report that the NMOs are going to read and vote on. This feels like an IFMSA 101 on policy documents. I love it. Sorry if I'm taking so much time. But anyways, so we have a program coordinator that coordinates a certain program. They have certain policy documents that fall under their program or that talk about subtopics in their program, and the activity coordinators nationally. So they have the content of the activity coordinators, and this is how it reaches them, either through the program coordinator or through the NMO president or the NMO representation that they have with IFMSA. So for the policy document on comprehensive sexuality education, it's delivered to the members either through the program coordinators, the program coordinator for realizing sexual and reproductive health and rights, that's going to give them to the activity coordinators on different activities that fall under this program, or they get them from their NORA, because this is a SCORA policy document. And this is how they know what's happening globally, and they should align their activity to that locally. Because in IFMSA, yes, we do external advocacy internationally and whatnot, but the actual actions we take are taken locally. Think globally, act locally, again, is the motto for our IFMSA programs. And this is how we know that it reached both ground level and is being implemented. Unfortunately, there is not a way to quite follow up on its on-ground implementation because it falls under the LC presidents, under the NMO, and how it coordinates its local committees. However, we can make sure that it's at least communicated to NMOs, and it's up to NMOs to agree to the content of that policy document or not. And this is how the policy passes. It's either 2/3 of the NMOs agree to it and they adopt it or not. I hope this answers your question, Prathamesh. Thank you for asking it.
Okay, thank you so much, Darren, for answering. We have one more question. This will be the last question we'll take. If you have any other questions, please send it over to me. I will send it over to Darren and Anna, and then I can forward you the answers. So my question is probably, Ella Nazir is asking, my question is probably a little technical, but I would love to know how to produce feasible KPIs the best aligned strategically with the 3-year renewable. For example, say like if only 20% of the project currently include lower middle income country co-leads, should our pilot goal be 50% or should we aim for higher stretch goals? If you understood the question, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I think that what we want at the end of the day is for people to be included. And I will forward it after I say some things like Doreen can like add because it's like the equity queen. But like from my perspective, being let's say it's out of the deep knowledge on these areas, I think it's very important, like on a general level, to make sure that people are included, that people are there, right? If we lived in again an ideal world, we wouldn't be having these discussions and we wouldn't need specific percentages from countries, from backgrounds, from, you know, specific people, from gender, etc. So I think you should, it's not exactly up to the percentage that I can answer specifically, oh, it could be ideal to have 60% or like 50%. But since there needs to be a percentage for these people to be included because we don't live in an ideal world, I would say try to take information from these countries. Try to reach out to people from these countries. Okay, what do you think would be ideal? Right? And I'm talking also like from European perspective, that although that I have met a lot of people from around the world and I know the situation in a lot of countries, it's not up to me to say, oh, I think, you know, like this is the percentage that should be better because I'm from a high income country. And this would mean that I'm just imposing my thoughts or what I think is needed into other people. And I think this has been happening for quite a long time. And it is the time to start uh, pulling back and let people decide what they feel should be enough for them to be. represented. Doreen, you can add.
Thank you so much. Now, it's important for me to start by saying that unfortunately, I'm not from a high income country. I'm from a middle income country. And I think that I'm going to answer this question without getting into corporate jargon. It's a great and very tricky question. Thank you so much. You challenged my brain. I think that it is important to set KPIs, especially for something like a three-year strategy or 5-year strategy. It is important to remind ourselves that yes, it's good to have ambition, but is it feasible? So it's good to balance feasibility with ambition. So if you're starting from, as you said, 20% of projects with low to middle income country co-leads, jumping straight to 80% sounds too inspiring. I'm going to be very direct. It could be set up for I don't know. I would rather say aim for 40 to 50% in the first phase, and then you assess it. You make it progressive. This is very important. You cannot jump from 20 to 80%, but from 40 to 50 in the first in the first phase of implementation, and then you assess it after year 2 or year 3 once you've made stronger collaborations or built capacity, especially when you have partnerships or institutions that in beginning were not willing to support such a big jump. So in this way, when you aim for 40 to 50%, you are showing ambition, but you're also humbling yourself and grounding it in reality checks and actually allowing space for consistent growth, not necessarily exponential growth. So the idea really is not to have the perfect numbers on paper. Oh my God, we're achieving so much and what? No, but it's to have actual targets that are going to push the change, the change that you're aspiring, while actually staying achievable, while not challenging their human resources, and while not lying to people about false promises, let's say. Thank you.
I hope that answered your question, Ella. Okay, we don't have any more question as of now. If we do, I'll forward it to the two of you. Now, just a little announcement, and then we'll take pictures and we'll say bye-bye and thank yous. So next week, we have another open space discussion, which will be on meaningful youth engagement in high-level meetings. And we have few people from MSA India who have represented IFMSA at different high-level meetings who will come and tell the process of how to get into it and all. So if you all are free, please sign up for it, and we hope to see you on 31st, 7:30 to 8:30 again. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank, first of all the participants for sticking with us till the end. And the biggest thanks to Darin and Anna for, on behalf of the External Affairs team and on behalf of MSCI for, taking the time out. And we would like to express sincere gratitude, for taking the time to speak in this session, and, the willingness to share with no cover or with no filter, your experiences and examples, so that it could not only motivate but also, capacitate our members, and will help us, participate better, understand how policies can be effectively integrated in our advocacy and practice. And your insights and stories are really something that brought, this OSD to life. So thank you so much for sharing, and hopefully we get to see you again. And thank you. And also like to thank my team who has worked on very short deadlines and like I'm sorry for giving you short deadlines, but yes, thank you so much. Okay. And I think now we can take a picture. Everyone can put your cameras on if you're okay with it. And Leah,